Does my son support me? Are you kidding me? The words left my mouth with a force I did not even recognize in myself. Jessica froze in front of me, clutching that folder of papers she had brought to show me her calculations of exactly how much I should pay her to live here, in my own house. I am 68 years old, and this woman, who has barely been married to my son for 3 years, dares to tell me that I must pay rent or find a job to contribute because Daniel supports me. I watched as her expression of confidence began to crack. Her fingers squeezed the folder tighter, and a small bead of sweat appeared on her perfectly made-up temple. "Margaret, do not get upset," she said, trying to recover that condescending tone she used so often with me. "I am just being practical. This house has expenses, and you do not contribute anything." I felt the rage rising in my throat, but I forced myself to stay calm. I had waited for this moment for months. I had endured her comments, her looks of disdain, her not-so-subtle suggestions that I was extra baggage in this house. But this demand that I pay rent, this claim that my son supported me, this was the limit. "Let me ask you something, Jessica," I said, taking a step toward her. She instinctively stepped back. "Have you ever actually seen the property deed for this house?" Her face paled visibly. "I do not understand what that has to do with anything," she stammered. "It has everything to do with it," I replied. "Because when you talk about who supports whom, when you talk about who pays for what, you should know exactly whose house you are standing in." The sweat on her forehead was no longer a single drop, but several. Her eyes darted nervously from side to side, as if looking for an escape route. "Daniel told me the house was in his name," she murmured with a trembling voice. "Oh, really? Daniel told you that? How interesting. Because the papers I have kept safe in my bedroom say something very different. And when I mentioned those documents, when I pronounced the word papers, I saw the color completely vanish from her face. But I am getting too far ahead of myself. To make you understand how we reached this moment, to make you comprehend why Jessica's words wounded me so deeply, I need to tell you how this all started. I need to take you back in time, to when this house was just an impossible dream and I was a widow with a small boy to raise. It has been 3 months since Jessica entered my life. 3 months since my son Daniel came home with that nervous smile and told me he had met someone special. I was happy for him. After all, he was already 32 years old, and I had started to think he would never marry. Jessica came to dinner that first night, wearing an elegant dress and carrying a bottle of expensive wine. She shook my hand firmly, looked me straight in the eyes, and said she had heard a lot about me. During those first few weeks, everything seemed normal. Jessica came to visit us, always polite, always smiling. She helped set the table, praised my cooking, and asked Daniel about his work. I thought he had finally found a good woman, one who would take care of him, one who would make him happy. How wrong I was. The wedding was small, intimate. Daniel asked me if I minded if they lived here for a while, just until they saved enough for their own place. Of course I did not mind. This house has 3 bedrooms, and I had lived alone since he left for college. Having him back, even temporarily, filled my heart. I suspected nothing when Jessica started bringing her things over. I did not see the red flags when she began rearranging the living room furniture. The first month was quiet. Jessica worked at a real estate office and left early every morning. Daniel continued with his job at the construction firm, just as always. I kept the house clean, made breakfast, cooked dinner. It was my way of contributing, I thought. My way of helping them as they started their life together. But things began to change subtly. First, it was small comments. "Margaret, why do you use so much butter when you cook? It is better for your health to use less." "Oh, Margaret, I think we should buy other furniture for the living room. This stuff is a bit outdated." I nodded, smiled, accepted her suggestions. After all, she was young, modern. Maybe she was right. Then came the looks. Those glances that linger a second too long when I enter a room. Those expressions of slight annoyance when I sit on the sofa in the afternoon. Those almost imperceptible sighs when I brew coffee in the morning. I started to feel uncomfortable in my own house, but I told myself I was exaggerating, that it was all in my imagination. The second month, things intensified. Jessica started making bigger changes. She replaced the living room curtains without asking me. She bought new dishes and packed mine away in boxes in the garage. She painted the guest room a color I did not like. When I tried to give an opinion, She smiled with exaggerated patience and said it was important that the house feel like a home for them too. Daniel said nothing. My son, who used to tell me everything, had become distant. He arrived tired from work, ate dinner in silence, and locked himself in his room with Jessica. When I tried to talk to him, he was always in a hurry, always had something to do. Jessica is tired, Mom. Jessica has a headache. Jessica needs to rest. Jessica, Jessica, Jessica. One day I found the framed photograph of my husband, which had always been on the mantel, in the trash. I pulled it out with trembling hands and went to find Jessica. She was in the kitchen making a green smoothie, one of those she drank every morning. I showed her the photo and asked why she had thrown it away. She looked at me with genuine surprise, or at least acted surprise. "Oh, Margaret, I am so sorry. I thought it was trash. It looked so old and the frame was broken. I did not know it was important." The frame was not broken. The photo was not old. But I said nothing. I just cleaned the glass, put it back in its place, and swallowed the tears that threatened to come out. That night I heard Jessica talking to Daniel in their room. Her voice pierced through the thin walls. "Your mom is getting very sensitive over nonsense. We cannot walk on eggshells for her. This is our house too. Our house too." Those words haunted me for days. They made me question my place here. They made me wonder if I really was in the way, if I really should look for another place to live. But where would I go? This was my house. This house that I bought with the sweat of my brow, with years of working double shifts, with the money I saved by denying myself any luxuries to give everything to Daniel. The third month arrived with more changes. Jessica invited her parents to dinner without warning me. I was in old sweatpants and wearing no makeup when they arrived. She introduced me with that fake smile. "This is Margaret, Daniel's mom. She lives here with us." The way she said "lives here with us" made me feel like an intruder, as if I were the guest and they were the owners. Her parents looked at me with something resembling pity. Jessica's mother, an elegant woman with expensive jewelry, patted me on the shoulder. "How nice that Daniel is such a good son and takes care of you in your old age," she said. In my old age. I am 68 years old, not 80. I am perfectly capable of taking care of myself. But I said nothing. I just smiled and served the dinner I had prepared with leftovers I found in the refrigerator, because no one had warned me we would have guests. That night, while I was washing the dishes, I heard Jessica talking to her mother in the living room. "It is not easy, Mom, having your mother-in-law living with you. We have no privacy. We cannot decorate how we want. We cannot make plans without thinking of her." Her mother murmured something I did not catch. Then Jessica continued. "Daniel feels guilty asking her to leave. But I think she should understand that newlyweds need their space." I felt my stomach knot up. So that was the problem. I was the problem. Jessica wanted me to leave, but she did not have the courage to tell me directly. Then began the silent campaign. The comments about older people living happily in retirement communities. The articles she casually left on the dining table about the importance of independence in the golden years. The suggestions that I should go out more, make friends, find activities. I started spending more time in my room. I got up early to make breakfast before they woke up. I cleaned when they were not home. I ate dinner quickly and retreated to my room with the excuse of being tired. I tried to make myself invisible, to not be in the way, to not be a burden, but it was never enough. And so we arrived at today. At this moment, at Jessica standing in front of me with her folder of papers, telling me that I must pay rent or look for work because my son supports me, telling me that I live on charity in this house, telling me that I am a burden that Daniel drags along out of pity. The sweat was now running freely down her face. Her hands shook holding that folder, and I, finally, after months of silence, was ready to speak my truth. The first rays of sun entered through my bedroom window every morning at 5:30. I did not need an alarm. My body had already memorized that schedule after decades of waking up early. I would get up slowly, feeling my joints protest with every movement. 68 years weigh on you, even though I insisted on pretending they did not. I put on my robe and slippers in silence. The house slept at that hour, and I moved like a ghost through the hallways, careful not to make noise. First I went to the bathroom, then to the kitchen. I turned on the coffee maker, and while the water boiled, I opened the window to let in the fresh morning air. That was my moment. Those 20 minutes before the day began were mine alone. I sat at the dining table with my cup of black coffee, no sugar. The doctor had told me to watch my sugar. He had told me many things about taking care of myself, about not making excessive efforts, about resting more. But how do you rest when you have a household to maintain? How do you rest when you want to prove that you are still useful, that you still have value? I looked out the window while I drank my coffee. I watched the neighbors go out for a run, the workers heading to their jobs, Mrs. Henderson from the house across the street watering her plants. She waved at me when she saw me and I returned the wave. We were of the same generation, she and I. Women who had raised families, who had worked until exhaustion, who now watched how the world spun faster and faster around us. At 6:15, I started preparing breakfast. Daniel came down at 7 before leaving for work. Jessica appeared 10 minutes later, always perfectly groomed, with her makeup flawless and her office clothes ironed. I served scrambled eggs, hash browns, warm biscuits. Daniel ate fast, thanked me with a kiss on the forehead, and ran out. Jessica barely touched the food, always saying she was watching her figure, that she preferred her green smoothie. After they left, I tidied the kitchen. I washed the dishes by hand, even though we had a dishwasher. I liked feeling the hot water. I liked the ritual of cleaning every plate, every cup, every fork. Then I dried everything and put it in its place. The place Jessica had designated when she reorganized all the cabinets 2 months ago without asking me. The mornings passed slowly. I cleaned the house room by room. I vacuumed the living room, dusted the furniture Jessica had bought to replace mine, arranged the decorative cushions she insisted on putting on the sofa, even though no one liked sitting on them. I cleaned the bathroom they used, picked up the wet towels Jessica left lying around, closed the jars of expensive creams she left open. By mid-morning, I went out to the patio. I watered the plants my husband had planted 20 years ago. Roses, geraniums, hydrangeas. Some did not bloom like before, but I continued caring for them with devotion. It was my connection to him, to the days when this house was full of laughter and plans for the future. When I was not invisible, when I mattered. Lunch I prepared for myself alone. Daniel and Jessica ate out, at restaurants near their jobs. I made myself something simple. Soup, a sandwich, leftovers from the day before. I ate in the kitchen, watching cooking shows on the small television I had on the counter. That television had been mine since before Jessica arrived. It was one of the few objects she had not replaced yet. The afternoons were harder. The hours stretched out, empty and silent. Sometimes I called my sister Susan, who lived in another state. We talked about our aches and pains, about our children, about the old days. She asked me how things were going with Jessica, and I lied. I told her everything was fine, that the girl was attentive, that Daniel was happy. I could not admit the truth, not even to my sister. Other afternoons I walked through the neighborhood. I greeted the neighbors. I stopped at the corner store to buy something needed for the house. Mr. Robinson, the store owner, always asked me about Daniel. He told me he remembered when he was a boy who came to buy candy with the coins I gave him. Those memories made me smile and ache at the same time. I returned home before 5. Jessica arrived before Daniel, around 5:30. She entered with her phone glued to her ear, talking to her friends or clients. She did not even say hello to me. She went straight to her room. She changed clothes and settled in the living room with her laptop. I started preparing dinner in the kitchen, trying not to make much noise so as not to disturb her. Daniel arrived, tired, close to 7. He took off his dirty construction boots in the entryway and came to the kitchen. "Hi, Mom," he would say without much energy. He poured himself a glass of water. Sometimes he asked me what I was cooking, but the conversation never went further. Jessica called him from the living room and he went to her like an obedient puppy. We ate dinner, the 3 of us together, but separate. I served the food, they ate while checking their phones. Jessica made comments about her day, about her difficult clients, about her friends. Daniel nodded and responded with monosyllables. I ate in silence, invisible at my own table. When we finished, Jessica got up without clearing her plate and went to the living room. Daniel sometimes helped me clear the table, but lately he had stopped doing that too. I washed the dinner dishes while listening to the television in the living room. Jessica watched her favorite shows, those series about rich people with invented problems. Daniel sat beside her, scrolling on his phone. When I finished in the kitchen, I peeked into the living room to say goodnight. They barely looked up. "Good night, Mom," Daniel said. Jessica said nothing. I retreated to my room around 9. I closed the door and finally could breathe. That room was my refuge. My little space where Jessica had not been able to put her hands yet. There were my photos, my memories, my things. The bed where I had slept with my husband for 20 years. The vanity where he had proposed to me. The rocking chair where I had nursed Daniel when he was a baby. I sat in that rocking chair every night and took out my rosary. I prayed for my husband who rested in peace. I prayed for Daniel, for his happiness, for his marriage. I even prayed for Jessica, asking God to soften her heart. And I prayed for myself, for strength, for patience, to know when to speak and when to be silent. Sometimes I cried in that rocking chair, silent tears that I wiped quickly with the back of my hand. I cried for the loneliness I felt surrounded by people. I cried for my son who had become a stranger. I cried for this house that no longer felt like my home. But after crying, I dried my eyes, put on my nightgown, and got into bed with the determination that tomorrow would be another day. The weekends were different, but not better. Jessica slept late and got upset if I made noise in the kitchen. Daniel got up early just to go play football with his friends. I took advantage of the time to do a deep clean. I washed the curtains, mopped the floors, cleaned the windows. I worked nonstop because if I stopped, if I sat down to rest, the thoughts came. Dark thoughts about what I had done wrong, about why my son no longer loved me like before. Jessica went out on Saturday afternoons with her friends. She spent hours getting ready in front of the mirror, trying on different outfits, different hairstyles. I watched her from the door of my room and remembered when I too was young and got ready like that to go out with my husband. But those days were so far behind, they seemed like another life, another person's life. On Sundays, Jessica insisted we go out to eat, the three of us. As a family, she said. I dressed in my best clothes, combed my hair carefully, put on a little lipstick. But at the restaurant, I felt out of place. Jessica chose expensive places where the waiters looked at me as if I did not belong. She ordered dishes I did not know, wines that cost more than I spent on food in a week. Daniel paid the bill without blinking. I watched how he took out his credit card and signed the receipt with those numbers that made me dizzy. $120 for a meal. $150. $200. I thought about all the times I had divided a chicken into 3 meals when Daniel was a child. All the times I had bought the cheapest store brand of everything to be able to pay the bills. And now he spent on a single meal what I spent in 2 weeks. But I said nothing. I smiled and said thank you and pretended to enjoy those lunches where Jessica talked nonstop and Daniel nodded and I was just another piece of furniture at the table. Afterward, we returned home and they locked themselves in their room to watch movies or do whatever it was they did. I stayed in the living room, watching my own shows, feeling the weight of the silence. This was my life now. This endless routine of cleaning, cooking, trying not to be in the way, of being useful without being seen, of existing without bothering anyone. I had accepted this role because I loved my son, because I wanted him to be happy, because I thought it was my duty as a mother to adapt to his new life. But every day was harder. Every day I felt smaller, more invisible, more useless. At night, in my rocking chair, I wondered how much longer I could go on like this. How much longer before Jessica asked me directly to leave. Or worse, before Daniel did. That idea terrified me more than anything else. The idea that my own son, the child who had grown in my womb, who had nursed at my breast, who had learned to walk holding on to my hands, would tell me he no longer wanted me here. And then that day arrived. That day started like all the others. Me folding towels in the living room. Jessica arriving with her attitude of the lady of the manor. And those words that changed everything. Your son supports you. You live on charity. You must pay rent. As if all those years had not existed. As if all my sacrifice was worth nothing. As if I were nothing. The history of this house began 25 years ago, when I was a 43-year-old woman recently widowed with a 7-year-old son. My husband had died in a work accident, falling from a scaffold on a construction site. The compensation I received was miserable. $10,000 that vanished with the funeral, the medical debts he had left, and the first months of survival. I worked cleaning houses during the day. 5 different houses, 5 days a week. They paid me $50 per house, sometimes $60 if the cleaning was deeper, $250 a week, $1,000 a month, if I was lucky and no client got sick or canceled for vacation. With that, I had to pay the rent for our small 2-bedroom apartment, the food, the utilities, clothes for Daniel, who grew so fast his pants were short on him every 6 months. At night, I worked at a laundry service, from 6 in the evening to 11 at night, 5 days a week, folding hotel sheets, pressing businessmen's shirts, packing restaurant uniforms. They paid me $9 an hour, $45 a night, $225 a week, almost $900 a month. Combining both jobs, I earned approximately $1,900 monthly. The rent for the apartment was $600. Utilities, another $150. Food, being very careful, buying only what was necessary, using coupons, looking for sales, cost me around $300 a month. Daniel's clothes, school supplies, medical expenses when he got sick, bus fare to get to and from work, all that added up to another $400 monthly. I had $450 left that I saved religiously in a savings account. Daniel spent the afternoons after school with Mrs. Cecilia, our neighbor, an older woman who charged me $5 a day to watch him, $35 a week, $140 a month. But it was that or leave him alone in the apartment, and I preferred to die before putting my son in danger. Mrs. Cecilia gave him a snack, helped him with his homework, kept him safe until I arrived from my first job. I arrived from the cleaning job at 5:30. I picked up Daniel. We made dinner together. He told me about his day at school while I cooked with what was in the refrigerator: rice and beans, noodle soup, scrambled eggs, nothing elaborate, nothing expensive. We ate together at our small table. I listened to his stories about his friends, about his teachers, about his dreams. At 5:45, I ran off to the laundry. Daniel stayed alone those 5 hours. He was 8 years old, then 9, then 10. Too young to stay alone, but there was no alternative. I left him written instructions on the refrigerator door. Do not open the door to anyone. Do not use the stove. Do your homework. Watch television. Go to bed at 9. Mrs. Cecilia was looking out from her apartment next door, but I still died of worry every night. I arrived home at 11:30 at night. Daniel was already asleep. I entered his room on tiptoes, tucked him in, kissed him on the forehead. Then I showered, put on my pajamas, and fell exhausted into my bed. 4 or 5 hours of sleep before the alarm rang at 5 in the morning to start it all over again. On weekends, I worked cleaning houses too. But those days, Daniel came with me. The clients did not know I brought my son. He stayed waiting outside or in the car when it was very hot. He brought his books, his toys, his lunchbox. He was an obedient child. He never complained. He never asked me why we did not have what other children had. Why didn't we go to the movies? Why didn't we eat at restaurants? Why were his clothes secondhand? So passed 3 years. 3 years saving every penny I could. $450 a month became $16,200. But it was not enough for the down payment on a house. I needed at least $25,000. So I got a third job. On Sunday mornings, I cleaned a church. They paid me $70, $280 a month, $2,800 a year. Daniel was 11 years old when I finally gathered the $25,000. $25,000 that had taken almost 4 years of my life. 4 years without vacations, without rest, without spending a single penny on myself. My clothes were the same as always, mended again and again. My shoes had holes in the soles that I covered with cardboard. I did not cut my hair in salons, but cut it myself in front of the bathroom mirror. I went to look for houses with a real estate agent, a man named Hector Ortega, who treated me with condescension because he knew I did not have much money. He showed me houses in the worst neighborhoods, houses that needed major repairs, houses with leaking roofs, plumbing problems, cracks in the walls. But they were houses. They were mine if I could pay for them. I found this house, a 3-bedroom construction in a working-class neighborhood. It was not new. It was 30 years old. The paint was peeling. The garden was a disaster. The kitchen had old cabinets and appliances from the 70s. But it was a good size. It had a solid structure. It had potential. and it cost $95,000. With my $25,000 down payment, I needed a loan of $70,000. I went to 4 different banks. Everyone rejected me. A single woman with 2 low-paying jobs without a solid credit history was too much risk. The 5th bank, a small credit union, finally approved me. But with an interest rate of 8.5%, my monthly payment would be $540 for 30 years. I signed the papers with trembling hands. The loan was only in my name, Margaret Salazar. The house was registered only in my name, Margaret Salazar. It was my house, mine. The first thing I truly owned since my husband had died. I cried when they gave me the keys. I cried from relief, from happiness, from terror at the responsibility I had just assumed. We moved with the little we had. A borrowed truck was enough to transport our furniture. Daniel's bed, my bed, the dining table, the old sofa, the small television, boxes with clothes, with dishes, with pots. We did not have much, but it was ours. And now we had a house to put everything in. The first years were difficult. $540 mortgage, plus utilities that were now higher because the house was bigger, plus maintenance because things broke constantly. The water heater broke down the first winter. I had to pay $400 for a new one. The roof started leaking during a storm. Another $600 in repairs. But I kept working. 3 jobs. Daniel grew. At 13, he could stay alone without worry. At 14, he got his first job delivering newspapers in the mornings before school. He earned $50 a week that I made him save for his education. At 16, he worked in a supermarket on weekends. $100 a week. Half he saved, half he spent on his things. I left the laundry job when Daniel was 15. My hands could not take it anymore. The doctor told me I had arthritis from so much ironing, so much folding, so much carrying weight. I focused only on cleaning houses, but I got more clients. 8 houses a week, $400 weekly, $1,600 a month. With that, I paid the mortgage, the utilities, the food, whatever was needed. Daniel graduated from high school with good grades. I got him a partial scholarship to the community college. He studied civil engineering. He worked part-time in construction during the summer. I continued cleaning houses to pay what the scholarship did not cover. Books, materials, transportation. Another $300 a month coming out of my pocket. He graduated at 22. He got a job at a major construction firm. He started earning $3,000 a month. Good money. I was so proud. He continued living with me because he said he wanted to save for his future. I did not charge him rent. I did not ask him to pay utilities. I only asked him to help me occasionally with house repairs. During those years, I paid my mortgage without fail. I never missed a single month. $540 every month for 25 years. In total, I had paid $162,000 for a house that had cost $95,000. That is how bank loans work. You pay almost double for the interest. By the time Daniel turned 30, I had only 5 years left to finish paying for the house. 60 more months of $540. $37,800 to completely own my house. I was already 63 years old. I still cleaned houses, although not as many. My body could not withstand the same rhythm, 5 houses a week instead of 8. But it was enough. Then Daniel met Jessica, and everything began to change. He told me they would get married, that they would live here temporarily. I accepted because he was my son, because I thought it would be nice to have company, because I never imagined she would view this house as hers, that she would treat me like an intruder, that she would make me feel like I was living on charity in the place I had bought with my blood and sweat. Now, 3 years later, the house was finally paid off. I had made the last payment 2 months ago. $187,000 I had paid in total for this property. Every penny had come from my working hands, from my knees ruined from so much kneeling to clean floors, from my back that hurt constantly from carrying buckets and vacuums, from my hands deformed by arthritis from so much scrubbing and polishing. This house was mine. Legally, morally, in every possible sense. The papers were in my safe, in my room. Deed in the name of Margaret Salazar, without any other name, without Daniel, without Jessica, just me. And now this woman, This girl who had entered my life barely 3 years ago was telling me to pay rent, that my son supported me, that I lived on charity. Jessica arrived in our lives on an October afternoon. Daniel had left early that Saturday, telling me he had plans with friends. He returned at 7 in the evening with a smile I hadn't seen on him since he was a teenager. "Mom, I want to introduce you to someone," he said with nervousness in his voice. And there she was, standing at the door in a tight white dress and heels that made her look taller than she was. "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Salazar," she said, extending her hand firmly. "I am Jessica Stone. Daniel has told me so much about you." Her handshake was strong, almost aggressive. Her eyes scanned me up and down in a second, evaluating me, cataloging me. I was wearing my house clothes, old pants, and a faded blouse. I felt small under her gaze. Come in," I said, stepping aside. Jessica walked in, looking at every corner of the living room with that expression I would later learn to recognize. It was judgment disguised as interest. Her eyes stopped on the worn sofa, on the curtains I had sewn myself 10 years ago, on the framed photographs on the mantel. "What a cozy house," she said, but the tone did not sound sincere. Daniel was beaming. He told me they had met 3 months ago at a work event. She was in real estate. She sold houses to people with money, people who could pay a $50,000 down payment without blinking, people who bought properties like someone buying shoes. I nodded as he spoke, watching how he looked at her with adoration, how she touched his arm possessively every time he said something. I made coffee and brought out some cookies I had baked that morning. Jessica took the cup delicately, but did not try the cookies. "I am watching my diet," she said with a smile that did not reach her eyes. Daniel took 3 cookies and devoured them while telling me they were the best in the world. Jessica looked at him with slight disapproval. The conversation was awkward. Jessica talked about her job, about the houses she sold, about the important clients she had. Houses worth $300,000, $500,000, $1 million. Numbers that sounded unreal to me. She talked about those amounts as if they were nothing, as if we all handled that kind of money. I listened in silence, feeling how every word marked the distance between her world and mine. "And what do you do, Mrs. Salazar?" she asked finally. "I clean houses," I answered without shame. "I have cleaned houses for 25 years. Jessica nodded slowly, her expression changing subtly. "Ah, what noble work," she said, but there was condescension in her voice. "Someone has to do that job, right?" My son shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Daniel quickly changed the subject, asking me about my day, about the neighbors, about anything that moved the conversation away from my work. But the damage was already done. Jessica had categorized my worth in that moment. I was the lady who cleaned houses. She was the professional who sold them. We were from different worlds, and her attitude made it clear she considered herself far above mine. That first visit lasted 2 hours. When they finally left, I gathered the coffee cups with trembling hands. There was something about Jessica that unsettled me. It wasn't just her arrogance or her superior attitude, it was something deeper. It was the way she looked at Daniel, as if he were a possession. The way she had observed my house, as if she were already calculating how to improve it, how to change it, how to make it hers. The visits became more frequent, twice a week at first, then 3 times, then 4. Jessica always arrived with something. A bottle of $100 wine, imported cheeses I didn't know how to pronounce, desserts from expensive bakeries that cost $20 a slice. I saw it as a waste, but Daniel was delighted with her attentions. She began making comments about the house. Casual, as if she were just making conversation. "This living room has so much potential," she would say, looking around. "With the right decor, it could look very modern." "Oh, the color of these walls is very outdated. A more neutral tone would make the space look bigger." I nodded without saying anything, but every comment was a small criticism of everything I had built. One day, she arrived with furniture catalogs. She put them on the dining table and began showing Daniel her choices. "Look at this sofa. It's perfect for the living room. And this dining table, imagine the dinners we could have here." I was in the kitchen, but I could hear her. "We could," she said, as if she already lived here, as if this house were already hers. Daniel asked me that night what I thought of Jessica. We were alone. She had left an hour ago. "If she makes you happy, son, then she makes me happy," I replied. But deep down, something was gnawing at me. Something told me this woman did not come with good intentions. That she saw my son, not for who he was, but for what he could give her. For the stability, for the house where he lived, for the life she wanted to build. The marriage proposal came 6 months after they met. Daniel told me with tears in his eyes. He had asked Jessica to marry him, and she had said yes. I hugged him and congratulated him because it was my duty as a mother to support him. But that night I cried in my room. I cried because I knew I was losing my son. Because once he married her, I would take a back seat. I would become an obstacle. The wedding was small but expensive. Jessica insisted it be in an elegant venue. Daniel paid $15,000 for a party of 80 people. $15,000 he had saved for years. I wore a dress I bought at a thrift store for $30. Jessica wore a designer dress that cost $3,000. The difference between us was never more obvious. During the reception, Jessica's parents sat at the head table. I was at a side table with distant relatives of Daniel's I barely knew. Jessica danced with her father, with Daniel, with her friends. I sat watching the party like a spectator of my own son's life. When he asked me to dance, well into the night, it was out of obligation, because someone reminded him he should dance with his mother. "Mom, I'm so happy," he told me while we danced. "Jessica is incredible. We're going to have a wonderful life together." I smiled and nodded, swallowing the words I wanted to say, the warnings I wanted to give him. The mother's instinct screaming at me that something wasn't right. But how do you tell your son on his wedding day that you think his wife isn't a good person? How do you destroy his happiness based on a hunch? The honeymoon was in Cancun, a week at an all-inclusive resort that cost $4,000. I stayed alone in the house, enjoying the peace but also feeling the emptiness. This was the calm before the storm. When they returned, Jessica would come to live here, and my life would change forever. They arrived on a Sunday afternoon, tanned, relaxed, happy. Jessica brought 4 suitcases full of clothes. "It's only temporary, Mom," Daniel assured me. "Just until we save for our own house." Jessica smiled, but her eyes said otherwise. They said it wasn't temporary. They said this house was now hers. The first week was about adjustments. Jessica arranged her clothes in Daniel's closet. She put her beauty products in the bathroom. Her expensive shoes filled the shoe rack. I retreated, making myself small, giving her space, trying not to be in the way in my own house. The second week, the suggestions started. "Margaret, don't you think we should change those curtains? They are very out of style." "Oh, Margaret, have you thought about painting the living room? This yellow color is very depressing." I replied that I would think about it, that I would consider it, knowing I didn't have money for those changes, knowing she knew it too. The third week suggestions turned into actions. She arrived one day with new curtains. She hung them without asking me. "They cost $200, she said proudly. Daniel paid for them, of course. I looked at my old yellow curtains, the ones I had sewn with my own hands, thrown in a trash bag. I felt as if they had thrown away a piece of me. Within a month, she had replaced half the living room furniture. The sofa where Daniel had grown up, where we had watched movies together, where I had comforted his childhood nightmares, was sold at a garage sale for $50. Jessica bought a new one for $2,500. "More modern," she said. "More appropriate for a young couple." I started feeling like a stranger in my own living room. The new furniture had no history, no memory. It was pretty, yes. Expensive, yes. But it wasn't mine. It didn't have the marks of a life lived. It was sterile, like Jessica. Beautiful on the outside, but cold on the inside. Daniel didn't seem to notice my discomfort. He was too busy pleasing his wife. He worked more hours to pay for all her purchases. He arrived tired, ate fast, went to sleep. The Sundays we used to spend together he now spent with Jessica. They went out to eat, went to the movies, visited her parents. I stayed alone at home, cleaning the new furniture I hadn't chosen, cooking meals no one appreciated. The months passed like this, Jessica taking more control, me ceding more ground. Until we reached this point, this moment where she dares to tell me to pay rent, where she has the nerve to claim my son supports me, where she believes she has the right to dictate my life in the house I bought with my sacrifice. And there I was, finally ready to defend what was mine. The comments from Jessica became part of my daily routine, like morning coffee or or the pain in my knees. They were constant, predictable, poisonous. Margaret, why do you cook with so much grease? Daniel needs to watch his health. Margaret, don't you think you should fix yourself up a little more? Women your age shouldn't let themselves go like that. Margaret, when was the last time you left the house? It's not healthy to be shut in all day. Every word was a small stab. She didn't shout. She didn't insult openly. She was too smart for that. Her attacks were subtle, wrapped in fake concern, disguised as well-intentioned advice. But I felt the poison behind every phrase. I felt myself becoming smaller with every comment. One morning I made breakfast as usual. Scrambled eggs with ham, fried beans, freshly made tortillas. Daniel came down first and sat down hungry. Jessica appeared 10 minutes later, already perfectly made up and dressed for work. She looked at the plate I had served with barely disguised disgust. Margaret, did you cook this with butter? She asked, lifting a fork and examining the eggs as if they were poison. I can't eat so much fat in the morning. It ruins my diet. Daniel, you shouldn't eat like this either. Look, you're getting a belly. She patted my son's stomach. He looked ashamed and pushed the half-finished plate away. I stood by the stove with the spatula still in my hand. I had gotten up early to make them a hot breakfast. I had used the last eggs in the refrigerator, and she rejected it as if I had served garbage. I can make you something else, I offered with a calm voice. Jessica sighed with impatience. Don't worry, I'll make my green smoothie as always. It's the only thing I really need in the mornings. She took out her expensive blender, the one she had bought that took up half the kitchen counter. She started putting in spinach, banana, protein powder, almond milk, ingredients that cost triple what I spent on normal food. The noise of the blender filled the kitchen. I threw away the eggs Daniel had left on the plate. Food wasted. Effort wasted. The comments about my appearance were especially cruel. Margaret, have you thought about dyeing your hair? Gray hair ages you a lot. Oh, Margaret, you should wear more modern clothes. Those pants look like they're from the 80s. I looked at my reflection in the mirror after every comment. My gray hair that I had decided to leave natural. My comfortable clothes that I had worn for years. Was it so bad? Was I really so ugly? One Saturday, Jessica insisted on taking me shopping. Do you need to update your wardrobe? She declared. You can't keep dressing like a grandma. We went to a department store where everything cost more than I earned in a week cleaning houses. She chose clothes for me without asking what I liked. Tight blouses that weren't my style. Uncomfortable pants. Shoes with heels I knew I couldn't wear because of my arthritis. This fits you perfectly, she said, holding a bright pink blouse against me. It makes you look younger. I tried on the clothes feeling like nothing fit right. Everything was for a body different from mine. A younger body, thinner, without the marks of 68 years of life. Jessica ended up buying me 3 outfits that cost $400. Daniel paid with his card without blinking. At home, she forced me to put on one of the outfits to show Daniel. I felt disguised, as if I were wearing someone else's clothes. My son looked at me and smiled without much enthusiasm. You look good, Mom, he said distractedly before returning to his phone. Jessica nodded, satisfied. See? You just needed a little help to look presentable. Presentable. As if before I had been a disaster. As if my way of dressing all my life had been shameful. That night I hung the new clothes in my closet and put my old comfortable pajamas back on. The expensive clothes stayed hanging for weeks without me touching them. Eventually, Jessica noticed and started making comments. We bought you new clothes and you don't even wear them. What a waste of money. The criticism extended to everything I did. My cleaning wasn't deep enough. My cooking was outdated and unhealthy. My way of speaking was too simple. Margaret, don't say yous, say you. Margaret, don't chew with your mouth open. Margaret, don't talk so loud when I'm on important calls. I became a child being constantly scolded. In my own house, at 68 years old, Daniel never defended me. When I tried to explain or justify myself, he asked me not to make drama. Jessica is just trying to help you. Mom, don't take it personally. But how not to take it personally when every part of my being was being criticized? The weekends were particularly difficult. Jessica invited her friends for coffee in my living room. They arrived with their designer bags and their conversations about spas and trips to Europe. I served the coffee and snacks Jessica had bought. They treated me like the maid. "Thanks," they said, without looking at me. Or they simply ignored my existence while I collected their empty cups. Once one of her friends asked who I was. Jessica replied with a casual voice, "Oh, she's my husband's mom. She lives with us." She didn't say it was my house. She didn't say she was the one living with me. She completely reversed the roles, and her friends nodded with expressions of pity. "How generous you are to take care of her," one said. "Not all children do that for their elderly parents." I left the room with trembling hands. I locked myself in my room and cried. I cried from humiliation. I cried from contained rage. I cried because every day I felt more invisible, more useless, more like a burden. And no one seemed to notice my pain. Or if they noticed, they didn't care enough to do anything about it. The straw that broke the camel's back before the final confrontation came one Sunday afternoon. Jessica had organized a family gathering without consulting me. She invited her parents, her older sister with her husband, and 2 of her cousins. She also invited my sister Susan, who lived 2 hours away and whom I hadn't seen for months. I found out about all this just Friday night. "Margaret, you'll need to prepare food for 12 people on Sunday," she informed me while checking her phone on the sofa. "My parents are coming at 2 in the afternoon. Make sure everything is perfect." I was folding laundry at that moment, and her words hit me like cold water. "Sunday? This Sunday? Jessica, I don't have time to prepare for so many people with only 2 days' notice." She looked up with an annoyed expression. "Why not? It's not like you have other things to do. Besides, it's just food. I'm not asking for anything extravagant. Something traditional is fine." Her words burned me. Just food. As if cooking for 12 people was something simple. As if my time was worth nothing. As if I had no right to refuse. Daniel was in the room, but said nothing. He played deaf while his wife gave me orders in my own house. I pressed my lips together and nodded. Because what else could I do? Refusing would mean creating a conflict. It would mean being the difficult mother-in-law, the one who ruins family harmony. So I accepted, as I always accepted everything. Saturday I got up at 5 in the morning and went to the market. I bought chicken, beef, vegetables, ingredients to make 3 different stews, rice, beans, handmade tortillas. I spent $120 of my own money because Jessica hadn't given me a dime for the shopping. Upon returning home loaded with bags, she was eating her green smoothie for breakfast without offering me help. I spent all Saturday cooking. I made pot roast, macaroni and cheese, green bean casserole. I made mashed potatoes, gravy, fresh biscuits. My hands ached from so much chopping and stirring. My back screamed from standing so many hours. At 10 at night, I was still in the kitchen finishing the last details. Jessica entered to get water and looked at everything with a critical expression. "I hope the food isn't too seasoned," she said. "My family doesn't like spicy food. And make sure everything is well presented. My parents are very particular about those things." I nodded without looking at her, with my hands submerged in soapy water washing the pots I had used. She left the kitchen without offering to help even once. Sunday I got up even earlier to finish preparations. I cleaned the house from top to bottom. I took out the good dishes, the ones we never used. I set the table with a tablecloth and cloth napkins. I ironed carefully. I arranged fresh flowers in a vase. I warmed all the food and served it on nice platters. By 1 in the afternoon, I was exhausted, but everything was ready. Jessica came down at 1:30 already dressed in an elegant dress and high heels. She inspected everything with a critical eye. She moved the vase 2 centimeters to the left, adjusted a napkin that according to her was crooked. She tasted the macaroni with a spoon and wrinkled her nose. "It's a little salty," she said, "but I guess it will have to do." The guests started arriving at 2 on the dot. Jessica's parents were the first. Mr. Leonard Diaz and his wife Ophelia. He was a hefty man with a gold watch and the attitude of someone used to being obeyed. She was thin and elegant, with perfectly coiffed hair and jewelry that probably cost more than my car. They greeted me coldly, shaking my hand briefly before heading to the living room. Then Jessica's sister, Tanya, arrived with her husband, Julio. They were younger, maybe 35 years old, both dressed in expensive clothes and arrogant attitudes. Jessica's cousins arrived together, 2 women in their 20s who wouldn't stop checking their phones. And finally, My sister Susan arrived, hugging me tight and whispering in my ear that I looked tired. Jessica played hostess as if the house were hers. She offered drinks, indicated where to sit, made conversation. I stayed in the kitchen, serving plates, filling glasses, bringing more hot biscuits. No one thanked me. No one noticed the effort. It was as if I were part of the furniture. During the meal, I sat at the corner of the table, in the only spot left available. I was between one of the cousins who wouldn't stop texting and Tanya's husband who spoke loudly about his new investment business. I ate in silence, listening to the conversations around me. Jessica's parents talked about their latest vacation in Spain. Tanya bragged about the new house they had just bought. The cousins argued about which brand of bags was better. Then Mr. Leonard looked around the table and said loudly, "This house is very cozy, Daniel. You did well buying it." The words hung in the air. I stopped chewing. I felt the blood rising to my face. Daniel shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Well, actually," he began to say, but Jessica interrupted him quickly. "Yes, Dad. Daniel works very hard to maintain this home. He has been a great provider." She looked at my son with false adoration. He smiled weakly and didn't correct the information. He didn't say the house was mine. He didn't say he just lived here. He stayed silent, allowing his father-in-law and everyone present to believe he was the owner. My sister Susan looked at me from the other side of the table. Her eyes were full of questions. She knew the truth. She had been with me during all those years of sacrifice to buy this house, but she said nothing. It wasn't her place to contradict Jessica at her own family gathering. Ophelia, Jessica's mother, took a sip of wine and looked at me condescendingly. "Margaret, you must be very grateful to have such a responsible son. Not all children care for their mothers in old age like this. It is a blessing to live with them instead of being alone somewhere." Her words were sweet, but the message was clear. I was the elderly mother being maintained by her generous son. Jessica nodded emphatically. "That's right, Mom. Daniel has a heart of gold. He always thinks of his mother first. Although sometimes it is difficult. Right, love? Not having privacy when you are newlyweds. But he never complains." She turned to me with that fake smile. "You are lucky to have him, Margaret." I felt something inside me beginning to break. It wasn't just the lie about the house. It was the way everyone looked at me with pity. It was the way they had turned me into a charity case, into the helpless old woman who depended on her son for a roof over her head. I gripped the fork so hard my knuckles turned white. Tanya added her comment. "My husband and I have talked about what we'll do when our parents get old. It's a big responsibility to take care of them." She looked at Julio, who nodded gravely. "But it's the right thing to do, I guess. Although it definitely affects your couple life." She looked significantly at Daniel and Jessica. The cousins laughed amongst themselves. One of them said in a barely audible voice, but one we all heard, "I couldn't live with my mother-in-law. I'd rather die." The other nudged her, but they laughed as if she had told the funniest joke in the world. I felt my cheeks burning. I felt my hands trembling. Mr. Leonard wiped his mouth with the napkin. "The food is good, Margaret. You have a talent for cooking. At least you can contribute that way, right? With cooking and cleaning. It's important that everyone contributes their part in a home." He raised his wine glass in my direction, as if paying me a compliment. I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up abruptly from the table. My chair scraped the floor, making a loud noise. Everyone fell silent, looking at me. "Excuse me," I murmured. "I need to get more water." I went out to the kitchen with quick steps, feeling all eyes fixed on my back. In the kitchen, I leaned against the sink with trembling hands. I breathed heavily, trying to control the rage bubbling inside me. My sister Susan entered behind me and closed the door. "Margaret, are you okay?" she asked with concern. She put her hand on my shoulder. I shook my head. "No, Susan, I'm not okay. Did you hear what they said? Did you hear how they talk about me as if I were a burden? As if I lived on charity in my own house?" My sister hugged me tight. "I know, but you know the truth. That's what matters. But it's not enough, Susan. I have worked all my life for this house. I have paid every penny. And now they treat me as if Daniel is doing me a favor letting me live here. As if I should be grateful. It is humiliating." The tears finally flowed. I cried in my sister's arms, while in the dining room, the cheerful conversation continued among people who viewed me as insignificant. The days after that family gathering were tense and silent. I moved through the house like a ghost, doing my chores without saying a word. Jessica noticed my change in attitude, but interpreted it as a victory. She had put me in my place in front of her whole family, and now I was being obedient. That was what she believed. But in reality, something had changed inside me. Every humiliating comment, every look of pity from her relatives, every word painting Daniel as my savior, all of that had lit a spark that had been fading for months. It was no longer sadness I felt. It was rage. A cold and calculated rage that grew every day. Jessica began to press more, as if she felt I had finally broken and now she could demand whatever she wanted. One Tuesday afternoon, while I was ironing clothes in the living room, she sat in front of me with her laptop and a notebook. "Margaret, we need to talk about something important," she said with that business tone she used with her clients. "I've been calculating the household expenses. Electricity has gone up because now we are 3 people. Water too. Food, obviously, costs more. And frankly, it's not fair that Daniel carries all that alone." I left the iron on the board and looked at her without saying anything. She continued, sliding her finger across her laptop screen. "I have calculated that your personal expenses add up to approximately $500 a month. That includes your portion of utilities, food, and the space you occupy. I think it is a reasonable amount that you could contribute." $500? I repeated slowly. Jessica nodded, as if she were being tremendously generous. "Yes, or if you prefer, you could look for some part-time work. I know at your age it is complicated, but I know places that hire older ladies for cleaning or childcare. With 3 or 4 days of work a week, you could gather that amount easily." I felt my blood boil, but kept my voice calm. "And if I can't pay that amount?" Jessica sighed, as if the question tired her. "Well, then we would have to consider other options. There are assisted living facilities for seniors that are very nice. Even some government-subsidized ones if you don't have resources. It wouldn't be so bad, Margaret. You would meet people your age, have activities, be taken care of." "Are you asking me to leave?" The words came out harder than I intended. Jessica raised her hands in a defensive gesture. No, nobody is kicking you out. I am just being practical about the situation. Daniel and I want to start a family soon. We need space, we need privacy, and we need the household finances to be balanced. It is nothing personal. It was all personal. Every word was a direct attack on my existence in this house, on my value as a person, on my right to be here. I picked up the iron again and continued my work without answering her. Jessica closed her laptop with a sharp snap. "Think about it, Margaret. I give you a week to decide what you are going to do. But this cannot continue like this indefinitely." That night, Daniel arrived late from work. He ate alone because Jessica and I had already eaten. I was washing dishes when he approached and leaned against the counter. "Mom, Jessica told me you guys talked today," he said with an uncomfortable voice, "about contributing to the house expenses." I stood motionless with my hands in the soapy water. "And what do you think, son?" He shifted uneasily. "Well, she is right that expenses have increased, and I work many hours to cover everything. It wouldn't be bad if you contributed something, even a small amount, just to help." I turned to look at him. This 32-year-old man who had been my baby, who had grown up supported by my effort, who had studied with the money I earned cleaning other people's floors. And now he was asking me to pay rent in my own house. "Do you really think I contribute nothing, Daniel?" I asked with a broken voice. He avoided my gaze. "I didn't say that, Mom, but you have to understand that Jessica and I have plans. We want to have children. We want to travel. We need to save. And you could help a little, right? We aren't asking much. Just $500 a month. Or if you can't pay, you could do more things around the house. Clean more thoroughly. Cook all meals. Wash our clothes. Something to balance things out. Something to balance things out." As if I didn't spend every day cleaning, cooking, washing. As if my work was worthless because it didn't come with a paycheck. I nodded slowly and returned to the dishes. "I understand," I said with a neutral voice. "Let me think about it." The following days, Jessica intensified her campaign. She left brochures for senior living residences on the dining table. She made comments about how liberating it would be for me to have my own space. How happy everyone would be if everyone lived their life independently. Her friends came and talked in front of me about their mothers-in-law who lived alone and how well they were doing. One afternoon, while I was folding towels in my room, I heard Jessica talking on the phone in the living room. Her voice carried through the thin walls. "Yes, Mom, she is still here. No, she hasn't said anything about leaving. She is incredibly stubborn." She paused, listening. I know. Daniel is too nice. He doesn't dare ask her directly to leave because he feels guilty. But I'm not going to live like this forever. We need our privacy." Another pause. "I'm considering giving her an ultimatum. Either she pays rent or she leaves. She cannot keep living on charity indefinitely. She is an adult woman. She should be able to support herself." Laughter. "Exactly. She already had her chance to raise her son. Now it's our turn to live our life without her watching everything we do." I sat on my bed with the towels half folded in my lap. Jessica's words confirmed everything I had feared. It wasn't just about money. It was about kicking me out of my own house. It was about erasing me from my son's life. It was about taking complete control of everything I had built. On Friday night, exactly 1 week after her initial conversation, Jessica summoned me to the living room. Daniel was present, sitting on the new sofa she had bought, looking at his hands with guilt. Jessica was standing, arms crossed, in a position of power. "Margaret, it's been a week," she began with a firm voice. "Have you thought about what we talked about? About your contribution to the house expenses?" I was sitting in the chair that used to be my favorite spot but now felt like the defendant's bench. I looked at my son, expecting him to say something, to defend me, to protect me as I had protected him all his life. But he kept looking at his hands in silence. "I have thought a lot," I finally replied. Jessica looked satisfied, anticipating I would yield to her demands. "Good. Then you are going to get a job or pay from your savings. It doesn't matter which you choose, as long as it is consistent every month." Before I could answer, she continued. "And since we are discussing this, there is one more thing. Daniel and I have decided we are going to remodel the house. Your room would be perfect as a nursery when we have the baby. So we will need you to move to the smaller room in the back, the one we use for storage. You will have to get rid of some furniture because not everything will fit, but it is a necessary sacrifice. My room, the room I had shared with my husband, where I had slept for 25 years, where all my memories were, and she wanted to turn it into a baby's room. She wanted to relegate me to the smallest room in the house, as if I were a second-class tenant. Also, Jessica continued without perceiving my silence as dangerous, we are going to need to establish some rules of coexistence. No cooking with strong smells that permeate the house. No watching television in the living room after 9 at night, because we need privacy. And when we have guests, it would be better if you stayed in your room so as not to make our guests uncomfortable. Every word was another nail in my coffin. Every demand was more absurd than the last. And my son was still sitting there, in silence, allowing his wife to humiliate me this way. Jessica pulled out a folder she had prepared. Here, I have everything in writing. The $500 monthly you must pay, the house rules, the schedule for moving to the other room. I just need you to sign here so everything is documented. She extended the folder and a pen to me. I looked at her without taking it. Jessica frowned with impatience. Margaret, don't make this harder than necessary. We are being very reasonable. Many families don't even allow their elderly parents to live with them. You should be grateful we are giving you options. Grateful. That word was the final straw. I stood up slowly, feeling every muscle in my body tremble not from weakness but from contained fury. Jessica took a step back, instinctively. Something in my expression alerted her. Margaret, don't be dramatic, she said, trying to regain her authoritative tone. But I wasn't listening to her anymore. I couldn't hold it in any longer. The weeks of humiliation, the months of being treated like a burden, the years of sacrifice no one valued, everything exploded in that moment. And finally, I was ready to speak my truth. My son supports me? The words left my mouth with a force that made Jessica step back another foot. Are you kidding me? I repeated, my voice rising in volume with every syllable. She opened her mouth to answer, but I raised my hand, stopping her. No, do not say another word. You have spoken enough for months. Now it is my turn. Daniel stood up alarmed. Mom, calm down. It's not necessary to make a scene. I looked at him with a mixture of pain and disappointment that made him recoil. A scene? Is that what you think this is? Your wife just asked me to pay $500 in rent, to move into the broom closet, to hide when you have guests, and you think I am the one making a scene. Jessica recovered some composure. Margaret, I understand you are upset, but these are decisions Daniel and I have made together. This is our house, and we have the right to set rules. I spun toward her so fast I almost tripped. Their house? Did you say their house? Yes, our house. Daniel's and mine. Jessica crossed her arms over her chest, trying to look sure, but I saw her hands shaking slightly. Daniel works very hard to maintain this home, and I contribute too. You are the one living here without paying anything. I walked toward her slowly. Jessica, let me ask you something. Have you ever actually seen the property deed for this house? She blinked, confused. What? Of course, it is in Daniel's study. Why? I laughed without humor. Have you seen it? Really seen it? Or did you just assume it was in my son's name? Daniel shifted uncomfortably. Mom, I don't understand where you are going with this. I turned to him with tears of rage in my eyes. You don't understand? Do you really not understand, or have you simply preferred not to tell your wife the truth? He paled. It's just that the topic never came up. Jessica looked at both of us with growing confusion and unease. What are you talking about, Daniel? What is it that never came up? Her voice went up an octave. What haven't you told me? My son opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Guilt was written in every line of his face. I brought out the words I had kept for so long. This house is not Daniel's, Jessica. This house is mine. Mine, bought with my money, paid for with my work, deeded in my name. Margaret Salazar, just my name. The silence that followed was deafening. Jessica looked at me as if I had spoken in another language. That is ridiculous. Daniel told me this was his house, that he bought it years ago. Right, love? She turned to my son, looking for confirmation. But Daniel had his eyes fixed on the floor, his face red with shame. I never said exactly that, he murmured. You assumed, and I didn't correct you. Jessica took a step back as if she had been slapped. What? You let me believe for 3 years that this house was yours? Why would you do that? He finally looked up. I didn't want you to think I had nothing, that I lived with my mom in her house. It sounded so pathetic. I continued, my voice gaining strength with every word. I bought this house 25 years ago, Jessica. 25 years working, cleaning other people's houses to be able to have my own. I worked 3 jobs simultaneously. I saved every penny, denying myself everything to give everything to my son. I paid $95,000 for this property with a loan that took me 25 years to pay off. I moved to the mantel where I had framed photographs. I took an old photo of Daniel as a child. Do you see this boy? This boy wore second-hand clothes because I put all my money toward the mortgage payment. This boy stayed alone at night because I had to work at a laundry until 11 to pay $540 a month for 30 years. The tears began to roll down my cheeks, but my voice did not falter. This boy ate rice and beans almost every day because it was the only thing we could afford. This boy grew while I broke my back, destroyed my hands, sacrificed my health so we would have a roof over our heads. A roof that is mine. Not yours, mine. Jessica had turned pale. Her eyes darted frantically from me to Daniel. But you said you paid the mortgage, that you maintained the house. Daniel shook his head ashamed. I pay utilities. Electric, water, gas, that is all. The house was already paid off when I married you. Already paid off? Jessica's voice broke. Then all this time, all the times you bragged to my parents about your house, about your property, you were lying? My son did not answer, but his silence was answer enough. I put down the photograph and took out my phone. Allow me to show you something, Jessica. I opened my bank app and showed her the screen. Do you see this receipt? It is from the last payment on my mortgage, dated 2 months ago. $187,000 I paid in total for this house that cost $95,000. That is how loans with 8.5% interest work. Jessica looked at the screen with glassy eyes. This cannot be true. Daniel, tell her this isn't true. But my son could only look at the floor ashamed. Jessica let herself fall onto the sofa, her folder with the rules and demands falling to the floor forgotten. And now, I continued, my voice like cold steel. You, who have been living in my house for 3 years without paying a single dime. You who have changed my furniture, painted my walls, reorganized my kitchen without asking me. You have the nerve to ask me to pay rent, to demand I move to the smallest room, to treat me like a burden in the house I built with my own hands. The tears ran freely down my face now. Do you know how many times I folded sheets until my hands bled to make a payment? How many times I cleaned 5 houses in a day even though my back screamed in pain? How many nights I went to bed hungry because there was only enough food for Daniel and I had to choose between eating or paying the electric bill? Jessica was sobbing now with her head in her hands. I didn't know. I didn't know any of this. Daniel should have told me. Should have, I shouted. Should have told you? And what about asking? What about not assuming? What about showing a modicum of respect for the woman who opened the doors of her home to you? I turned to my son. And you who grew up watching my sacrifice. You who saw me work until I fell exhausted every night. You allowed your wife to treat me like garbage. You allowed her to humiliate me, to ask me to pay rent in my own house, to tell me that you support me when I was the one who supported you every day of your life. Mom, I'm sorry, Daniel whispered with tears in his eyes. I didn't want things to come to this. I just wanted Jessica to be happy. I wanted her to feel like this was her house, too. At the cost of it ceasing to be mine? My voice broke. At the cost of making me feel invisible, of erasing my existence, of denying everything I did for you? The silence in the room was heavy and suffocating. Jessica cried on the sofa. Daniel trembled standing with clenched fists. And I, after months of enduring, of keeping quiet, of making myself small, had finally spoken my truth. Finally defended what was mine. I took my house key out of my pocket. This is my key to my house. I walked to my room, the one Jessica wanted to turn into a nursery, and opened the closet. From the top shelf, I took down a metal box. I opened it in front of them, revealing the legal documents. Property deed, in the name of Margaret Salazar. Receipts of all payments for 25 years. Proof of the original loan. Everything was there. Jessica looked at the documents as if they were a death sentence. Her perfect world, built on lies and assumptions, crumbled before her eyes. Daniel was crying openly now, the guilt finally catching up to him after months of cowardice. And then, with a calm but firm voice, I said the words that would change everything. Now listen to me well, both of you. We are going to establish new rules. My rules. In my house. The silence after my words was absolute. Jessica was still on the sofa with red and swollen eyes, looking at the property documents scattered on the coffee table as if they were evidence of a crime. Daniel stood by the window, shoulders slumped and head down, unable to look me in the eye. I sat in my chair, and took a deep breath before continuing. Rule number 1, I said with a clear and firm voice. This house stays in my name, solely in my name. There will be no transfers. There will be no legal changes. There will be nothing that takes away ownership of what I paid for with my blood and sweat. Daniel nodded without looking up. Jessica did not move. Rule number 2, if you wish to continue living here, you will do so with respect. Respect for me, respect for my space, respect for the decisions I make about my house. The derogatory comments are over. The looks of pity are over. Treating me as if I were a burden is over. Jessica wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, her runny makeup staining her face. Rule number 3, I continued. My room is mine and will continue to be mine. There will be no renovations without my consent. There will be no decor changes without consulting me first. This house has history, has memory, and I will not allow you to erase everything it represents just because it doesn't fit your vision of modernity. Every piece of old furniture you sold without asking me, Jessica, every photograph you threw away, every detail you changed was like ripping pieces of my soul. Jessica finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. I'm sorry. I truly am sorry, Margaret. I didn't know. If I had known the history of this house, if Daniel had told me the truth from the beginning. She turned to my son with resentment. Why did you lie to me? Why did you let me believe everything was yours? Daniel turned to her with tears in his eyes. Because I was afraid. Afraid you would think less of me. Afraid you wouldn't want to marry me if you knew I had nothing of my own. All your ex-boyfriends had houses, new cars, money. I just had a construction job and lived with my mom. I felt insignificant next to your family with their properties and businesses. So you built a lie, Jessica said bitterly. And I fell for it like a fool. You made me look like the villain, the wicked daughter-in-law who mistreats her mother-in-law, when in reality I was living in her house without even knowing it. Her hands shook as she spoke. My God, all the times I bragged to my parents, all the times I made comments about Daniel supporting his mother. How embarrassing. I watched this exchange without interrupting. They needed to face the consequences of their actions, of their lies, of their lack of communication. But after a few minutes, I raised my hand asking for silence. I haven't finished with the rules yet. Rule number 4. I want an apology. A sincere apology. Not just empty words, but actions that show you understand the damage you caused me. I looked at Jessica directly. You have humiliated me for months. You have made me feel invisible in my own house. You have criticized everything I do, everything I am. I want you to understand that I am not your enemy. I never was. I was just a mother trying to coexist with her son's wife. Jessica nodded with fresh tears rolling down her cheeks. You are right. I have been horrible to you. I projected my own insecurities onto you. I was afraid Daniel loved you more than me. I was afraid of being the second choice. So I tried to make you small, to make myself feel big. It was cruel, and I was completely wrong. And you? I turned to Daniel. You disappointed me more than anyone. I expected her not to understand, coming from a different world with different values. But you grew up here. You had my sacrifice. You knew how much every brick in these walls cost. And yet you allowed her to treat me like garbage. You never defended me. You never took my side. You preferred false peace over real justice. Daniel dropped into a chair with his face in his hands. I am a coward. I always was. Since I was a boy, hiding while you fought with the bank for more time to pay, pretending to be asleep while you cried in your room from exhaustion. I have never had your strength, Mom, and instead of learning from you, I let my weakness turn me into someone I don't even recognize myself. The clock on the wall marked 11 at night. We had been in this confrontation for hours. I felt exhausted, but also liberated. As if a weight I had carried for months had finally lifted from my shoulders. I stood up slowly, my joints protesting as always. Now comes the hard part, I said, looking at them both. You have to decide if you can live with these new rules. If you can treat me with the respect I deserve. If you can see this house for what it really is, my legacy, my refuge, my home that I opened to you out of love, not obligation. If the answer is no, if you feel you cannot accept this, then maybe it is time you look for your own place. Jessica looked at me surprised. Are you kicking us out? I shook my head. I am not kicking you out. I am giving you a choice. You can stay on my terms, or you can go build your own life somewhere else. But I am not going to continue being mistreated in my own house. Those days are over. Daniel stood up and walked toward me. Mom, I want to stay. I want to fix this. I want to compensate you for all the pain I caused you. Please, give me the chance to be the son I should have been from the beginning. He took my hands in his. The hands he knew since he was a baby, when he clung to my fingers while learning to walk. I looked at those hands. They were no longer the small hands of my boy. They were the hands of a grown man, calloused from construction work, strong and capable. But in that moment, squeezing mine with desperation, they became the hands of my son who needed me again, who wanted to make things right. I will need to see actions, not just words, I told him gently but firmly. Jessica approached too. Margaret, I want to stay too. I want to learn from you. I want to really know the extraordinary woman you are. I want you to teach me about sacrifice, about strength, about what it means to build something true with your own hands. And I want that someday, when we have children, they know their grandmother not as a burden but as the heroine she really is. Her words sounded sincere, but I had learned to be cautious. Time will tell if what you say is true or just pretty words to calm the storm. Jessica nodded understandingly. I will prove it to you. Every day I will prove it to you. The following days were of slow but significant changes. Jessica started asking me before making any change to the house. She consulted me about meals, about weekend plans, about everything. At first, she did it stiffly, like fulfilling an obligation, but gradually her attitude softened. She started asking genuine questions about my life, about my history, about how I had managed to buy the house being a single woman. One afternoon, we sat in the kitchen with coffee, and I told her everything, from the day I was widowed to the day I made the last mortgage payment. She listened with tears in her eyes, interrupting occasionally to ask questions. When I finished my story, she took my hands. "You are the strongest woman I have ever known." And I was a fool for not seeing it before. Daniel changed too. He started arriving earlier from work to spend time with me. On Sundays, instead of going out alone with Jessica, he insisted we do things the three of us together. He took me to a flea market where I found an antique rocking chair that reminded me of the one my mother had. We bought it together and put it in my room. "It's yours, Mom," he told me. "So you never forget that this house and everything in it is yours." Not everything was perfect. There were moments of tension, moments where old patterns threatened to return. But now I had a voice. Now I set boundaries. And most importantly, now they listened. 1 month after our confrontation, Jessica arrived home with a large box. She put it on the dining table with a nervous expression. "What is this?" I asked. "Open it," she replied. Inside the box was the old sofa cover. No, it was a receipt. "Look outside," she said. In the driveway was a delivery truck. They were unloading the old sofa, my sofa, the one she had sold at the garage sale. "I bought it back," she explained. "I had to look all over the neighborhood. The person who bought it didn't want to sell it, but I insisted. I paid $300 for something I sold for $50. But it's worth it, because it's yours, because it has history, because I had no right to get rid of it." I cried when I saw that sofa. Not because it was particularly pretty or valuable, but because it represented that she finally understood. She understood that this house wasn't just a building with walls and a roof. It was a home full of memory, of struggle, of love. That sofa went back to the living room, next to the new furniture, a mix of old and new, of past and present, of history and future. 3 months later, Jessica organized another family gathering. But this time it was different. She prepared the food, she served the plates, she attended the guests. And when her father made a comment about what a nice house we had, Jessica corrected him immediately. "This is Margaret's house, Dad. She bought it and paid for it completely alone. Daniel and I have the privilege of living here with her." Mr. Leonard's expression was one of surprise. Then he looked toward me with new respect. "Margaret? I didn't know." Jessica had given us another impression. "Accept my apologies." His wife Ophelia also apologized, ashamed of how she had treated me at the previous gathering. I accepted their apologies with grace because I had learned that forgiveness frees both the forgiver and the forgiven. Now, 6 months after that night, that changed everything. I feel at peace in my house. My true house. Jessica and I aren't best friends, but we have developed a mutual respect. She teaches me about technology and social media. I teach her old recipes and family stories. Daniel has recovered some of the closeness we had when he was a child. On Sundays, we cook together like we did before. Will they stay forever? I don't know. Maybe someday they will buy their own house and build their own story. And that will be okay. Because I no longer live in fear of being displaced or devalued. Because now everyone knows the truth. This house is mine. My name is on the papers. My sweat is in every wall. My life is woven into every corner. And if there is something I want other women to learn from my story, it is this. Never let anyone make you feel small in the space you built. No matter who that person is. No matter how much you love them or how much you want to keep the peace. Your dignity is not negotiable. Your value is not subject to debate. And your home, the one you built with sacrifice and tears, will always be yours. Today I sit in my rocking chair looking out the window. I am 68 years old. My hands are wrinkled and deformed by arthritis. My back hurts constantly, but I am in my house. In my house, and no one, ever again, will make me forget it.